My mother slammed her hand onto the will, looking me dead in the eye to say I would not get a single cent. I thought that was the betrayal, until I found my apartment door sealed shut with industrial foam weeks later. Watching the security footage of my brother laughing as he sprayed it, I realized the will was just the opening act. They wanted me erased, unaware I had built a fortress of legal secrets they could never touch. My name is Clara Pruitt, and in the sterile, air-conditioned hum of the server rooms at Ridgepoint Cyber Systems in downtown Minneapolis, I am known as a ghost hunter. I track vulnerabilities, patch invisible leaks, and build firewalls that keep the bad things out. But as I navigated my SUV through the sludge of a Tuesday evening commute, leaving the steel spine of the city for the suffocating quiet of the suburbs, I realized I had left my own perimeter wide open for nearly 30 years. The drive took exactly 40 minutes. It was a route I could drive blindfolded, though I wished I did not have to. The landscape shifted from the vertical ambition of the city to the horizontal sprawl of the American dream. Here, the snow was not the pristine white blanket seen in holiday movies. It was old, hardened into gray streaks along the curbs, packed down by the tires of minivans and sedans. The houses sat back from the road, identical in their architecture, separated by manicured lawns that were currently dead and buried under ice. Fences painted an aggressive white divided neighbors who smiled at each other in the grocery store, but probably did not know each other's middle names. I pulled into the driveway of the house I grew up in. The porch light was on, casting a warm, deceptive yellow glow against the siding. From the outside, it looked like a sanctuary. It looked like the kind of home where people drank cocoa and played board games. But as I killed the engine, a familiar heaviness settled in my chest. A specific kind of anxiety that only family can manufacture. It was the feeling of walking into a room where you know you are the topic of conversation, and the silence that follows your entry is the proof. I stepped inside, stomping the slush off my boots. The air in the house was too warm, smelling of roasted garlic and something sweet, like vanilla candles trying to mask the scent of old carpet. "Clara, you made it!" My mother, Elaine, called out from the dining room. The tone was cheerful, too cheerful. I walked into the dining room and stopped. The setup was wrong. Usually, family dinners involved paper napkins and the television droning in the background. Tonight, the good tablecloth was out. The heavy linen one with the lace edges that Mom only used for Thanksgiving or when the pastor came over. There were tapered candles burning in the center of the table. The crystal wine glasses, usually collecting dust in the china cabinet, were sparkling under the chandelier light. Red alert. In my experience, the Pruitt family only rolled out the fine dining for two reasons. 1, they needed money. 2, they were about to drop a bomb that would require a lot of wine to swallow. My father, Richard, sat at the head of the table, looking everywhere but at me. He was focused intently on folding his napkin, his knuckles white. My younger brother, Mason, was already seated, slouching in his chair with a smirk playing on his lips, tapping a fork against the table. Across from him was Brielle, my baby sister, her face illuminated by the blue light of her phone under the table. As I took my seat, I caught it, a look. It passed between Elaine and Mason, then darted to Richard, and finally settled on Brielle. It was a lightning-fast exchange of optical telegraphy, a silent confirmation that the trap was set and everyone knew their marks, everyone except me. "So," Brielle said, not looking up from her screen as I unfolded my napkin. "The city princess descends from her ivory tower. How is the high life? Clara? Finally dating a CEO yet? Or just married to your laptop?" "I am fine, Brielle," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Work is busy. Security never sleeps." "Must be nice," Mason chimed in. He reached for a roll, tearing it apart with his hands. "Sitting in a chair all day, typing code. Meanwhile, some of us are out here trying to navigate the real economy. It is brutal out there." Mason had not held a job for longer than 6 months in his entire life. He was 26 years old. "You could always apply at Ridgepoint, Mason," I said, reaching for the water pitcher. Entry-level tech support is hiring. Starting salary is decent. Mason let out a short, sharp laugh. Yeah, right. And become a corporate drone like you? No thanks. I have got my own projects. Besides, why stress when Big Sister is rich enough to pay for everything, right? He laughed like it was a joke. It was not a joke. Mason, be nice, Mom said, emerging from the kitchen with a roasting pan. But there was no bite in her scolding. She set the turkey down, a turkey, on a Tuesday, and looked at me with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Clara works very hard. Mason, we are all very proud of her success. Although, Clara, honey, speaking of work, did you get a chance to look at that invoice I sent you? The roof repair for the garage? The contractor is getting impatient. There it was, the sting in the tail of the compliment. I cut a piece of meat, the metal knife scraping loudly against the china. I paid it yesterday. Mom, $2,400. Just like I paid the property tax last month, and the heating bill the month before that. We are a family, Clara, Dad mumbled, finally looking up. We help each other. That is what families do. I looked around the table. The candlelight flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. I felt a sudden, violent surge of nausea. I looked at Mason, wearing a designer hoodie I knew I had paid for indirectly through a loan to Mom for groceries. I looked at Brielle, whose live streaming setup, camera, ring light, microphone, had cost me $3,000 because Mom said we needed to support her dreams. I looked at the walls of this house, a house that would have been foreclosed on 5 years ago if I had not stepped in and covered 18 months of mortgage payments while Dad was between opportunities. I was not a daughter here. I was a resource. I was a human ATM with a pulse. So, I said, putting my fork down. The food tasted like ash. Is that what this is? The candles? The wine? Is the furnace broken? Or does Mason need a new car? The room went quiet. The air pressure seemed to drop, sucking the oxygen out of the space. Elaine wiped her mouth delicately with the linen napkin. She exchanged one last look with Richard, a nod that was barely perceptible. Then, she reached under the table. She pulled out a folder. It was thick, gray, and ominous. She placed it on the table, right next to the gravy boat. Then, she placed her hand flat on top of it, fingers splayed wide, pressing it down into the wood as if she were pinning a wrestling opponent to the mat. No, Clara, Mom said. Her voice was different now. The cheerfulness was gone, replaced by a flat, terrifying calm. It was the voice of a woman who had rehearsed this speech in the mirror. This isn't about asking for money. This is about the future. Your father and I met with the attorney today. The estate planning is finished. The will has been finalized. I stared at the gray folder. Okay, I said slowly. And? We wanted to tell you in person, so there would be no confusion. She continued. Her eyes were locked on mine, unblinking. We have decided on the division of assets. Mason took a sip of wine, hiding a grin behind the glass. Brielle finally put her phone down, watching me with the curiosity of a child watching a bug about to be squashed. The house, Elaine said, tapping the table. The cabin up at the lake, the savings accounts, the life insurance policies, everything. She paused for effect. It is all going to Mason and Brielle. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Excuse me? The words came out of my throat like gravel. Mason is taking the house, Mom explained, as casually as if she were discussing who gets the last dinner roll. He needs stability. He is still finding his footing, and Brielle will get the cabin and the liquid assets to help launch her career. She is an artist. Clara, she needs a safety net. I looked at my father. He was staring at his plate, cutting his turkey into microscopic pieces. And me? I asked. My voice was dangerously quiet. What about me? What about the mortgage payments I made? What about the $50,000 I put into this house for the renovations? What about the fact that I am the only reason you still own the cabin? Elaine sighed, a sound of profound disappointment, as if I were being incredibly unreasonable. "Clara, look at you," she said, gesturing to my blazer, my watch, my general existence. "You are successful. You have a career at Ridgepoint. You make 6 figures. You have your own apartment in the city. You are independent." She leaned forward, her face softening into a mask of twisted maternal wisdom. "You don't need it, Clara. You are the strong one. Mason and Brielle, they need the help. They need the head start. It is about equity, not equality. We are doing what is best for the children who need us most." It was a slap in the face so hard I physically recoiled. I was being punished for competence. I was being disinherited because I had been the one to step up, to work late, to save them over and over again. My reliability had become my liability. "So," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I was struggling to contain. "Because I worked hard. Because I bailed you out. Because I was the responsible one. I get nothing? I am being erased from this family because I funded it?" "Do not be dramatic," Mason sneered. "You are just greedy. You have enough. Why do you want to take from us?" "I paid for your college tuition. Mason," I snapped, turning on him. "For a degree you dropped out of after 2 semesters. That was $20,000. "That was a gift," he shouted back. "Enough!" Elaine slammed her hand on the table again. The cutlery rattled. She took a deep breath, composing herself. She placed her hand back on the gray folder, her fingers curling over the edge, guarding it. She looked at me with eyes that were cold, empty, and terrifyingly resolved. My mom placed her hand on the will and looked me straight in the eye. "You won't get a single cent." The sentence hung in the air, final and absolute. It was not just about money. It was a statement of worth. In their eyes, I was simply a utility provider, and you do not leave an inheritance to the electric company. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had called me crying 3 months ago because she was overdrawn. The woman I had transferred $500 to within 3 minutes. I looked at my father, the coward. I looked at my siblings, the parasites. Something inside me snapped, but it was not a loud snap. It was the quiet, metallic click of a lock sliding into place. The part of me that desperately wanted their approval, the part that wrote the checks hoping to buy love, died in that chair. I picked up my napkin and placed it gently on the table. I did not scream. I did not cry. I reached for my purse. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. A harsh sound in the quiet room. I looked down at Elaine, whose hand was still resting on that folder as if it were a shield. "Fine," I said. My voice was ice. "If I am so independent, and if I am not getting a single cent because I do not need it, then I guess you are right." I pushed my chair in. "But remember this," I said, looking from Mason to Brielle and finally resting my gaze on my mother. "If I am out of the will, I am out of the bills. You want to give everything to them? Then they can pay for it. From this moment on, don't expect another cent from me. Not for the mortgage, not for the car insurance, not for the emergencies, nothing." "You would not dare," Elaine hissed, her confidence wavering for a fraction of a second. "We are your family." "Not anymore," I said. "I am just the bank, and the bank is closed." I turned my back on them. I walked out of the dining room, down the hallway with the family photos that suddenly looked like pictures of strangers, and out the front door. I did not slam it. I closed it firmly. Hearing the latch click, I walked into the cold night air, the gray snow crunching under my boots, and got into my car. As I drove away, leaving the warm yellow light of the porch behind me, I did not know that inside that house, the war had just begun. I thought I had ended it. I was wrong. The drive back to downtown Minneapolis was a blur of wet asphalt and smearing red taillights. The sky had opened up, dropping a miserable mix of rain and sleet that coated the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. I kept the heater off. I needed the cold. I needed to feel the bite of the air to keep from screaming. Every mile I put between myself and that dining room table felt like a physical tearing. My mind, traitorous as it was, kept replaying the greatest hits of the last decade. I heard my mother's voice from 3 years ago, soft and trembling, telling me they were 2 months behind on the mortgage because Dad's investment failed. I heard Mason's voice, charming and desperate, swearing he just needed $500 to fix his transmission so he could get to a job interview that I later learned never existed. I heard the phrase "family helps family" looping in my head like a broken record, a mantra designed to bypass logic and hotwire my wallet. I had bought into it. That was the humiliating part. I had not just been robbed. I had handed them the combination to the safe because I thought I was buying love. I thought I was buying a seat at the table. Tonight, I learned that the seat was rented, and the lease had just expired. I pulled into the parking garage of my apartment building in the North Loop. The concrete structure was gray and utilitarian, but as I parked my car, I felt a strange sense of ownership I never felt in the suburbs. I took the elevator up to the 4th floor. My apartment was small. It was a 1-bedroom unit with exposed brick and industrial pipes, freezing in the winter and humid in the summer, but as I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the silence welcomed me. There were no lace tablecloths here, no hidden agendas, no debts. I looked at the granite countertop I had paid for. I looked at the rug I had bought on sale. This was the only space in the world where I knew for a fact that every square inch belonged to me because I had the receipts to prove it. I tossed my keys on the counter. My phone, which I had tossed onto the sofa, buzzed. Then it buzzed again, and again. It began to vibrate across the fabric cushion like an angry insect. I picked it up. The screen was lit up with notifications. 7 missed calls from Mom, 3 missed calls from Dad, a text from Brielle. "You seriously ruined dinner. Mom is crying. Are you happy?" A text from Mason. "Wow. Drama queen much? Just come back and apologize." A voicemail from Elaine. I did not listen to the voicemail. I did not open the texts. I just stared at the names. They were panicked. Not because they missed me, but because the ATM had just walked out the door and taken the PIN code with it. They were scrambling to punch buttons, hoping cash would still dispense if they hit the machine hard enough. I sat down on my sofa, keeping my coat on. I was still shivering. I unlocked my phone, but I did not go to the messages. I opened my banking app. Face ID let me in. The blue screen loaded, showing my checking account, my savings, and my credit cards. I tapped on the Transfer History tab. It was a crime scene. Scrolling down, it was just a long, red list of subtractions. Transfer to Elaine Pruitt, $1,200. Transfer to Mason Pruitt, $400. Payment to state. Farm. Insurance, Dad's truck, $180. Transfer to Brielle. Pruitt, $600. I scrolled back a year, then 2, then 3. I saw the emergency medical bill for Dad's back pain that turned out to be a new set of golf clubs. I saw the tuition payments for Mason's graphic design course he quit after 3 weeks. I saw the loan for the roof repair that Mom claimed cost $5,000, though the contractor told me later it was only $3,000. I was not a daughter. I was a zero-interest lender with a 100% default rate. I took a deep breath. The air in my lungs felt sharp. I tapped on the bill pay section. There it was, the list of automated payments I had set up to make their lives easier, to make sure they did not have to worry, to make sure they loved me. Mortgage. Recurring monthly. I stared at the button. My finger hovered over it. A wave of nausea hit me. The conditioning was deep. A voice in my head screamed that if I pressed this, they would lose the house, that it would be my fault, that I was ungrateful and cruel. I remembered Elaine's hand on the will. "You won't get a single cent." I pressed cancel. A confirmation box popped up. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment?" I pressed yes. The line disappeared. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of panic and liberation. Richard's car insurance, recurring monthly, cancel, confirm, gone. Mason's phone bill, recurring monthly. I actually laughed out loud at this one, a dry, humorless sound. I had been paying for the data he used to ignore my texts. Cancel. Confirm. Gone. Brielle's Adobe Creative Cloud subscription. Recurring monthly. Cancel. Confirm. Gone. With every tap, a layer of heavy, suffocating guilt peeled away from my skin. It hurt. It felt like tearing off a bandage that had fused with the wound. But beneath the pain, there was something else. Lightness. Control. My phone rang in my hand. It was Elaine. I stared at the picture of her I had set years ago. A smiling photo of us at my college graduation. I almost declined it, but I needed to say it. I needed to say it out loud so the universe could hear me. I slid the bar to answer. Clara! Her voice was shrill, lacking any of the soft manipulation from dinner. What are you doing? I just got an email from the mortgage portal. It says the autopay was canceled. Fix it right now. No, I said. Excuse me? She demanded. Have you lost your mind? You know we cannot cover that payment until the 15th. You are going to ruin our credit score. How can you be so selfish? After everything we have done for you. What have you done for me, Mom? I asked, my voice steady. Besides take? We raised you. We gave you a home, she was shouting now. You are acting like a spoiled brat because you didn't get your way with the will. This is financial blackmail. Clara, it is ugly. It is beneath you. The will made it clear. Mom, I said, walking over to the window to look down at the city lights. Mason and Brielle are the beneficiaries. They get the assets. They get the house. So, they get the bills attached to them. That is how ownership works. They don't have the money, she screamed. You have the money. Then maybe they should get jobs, I said. Or maybe you should sell the cabin I paid to renovate. You are betraying your family, she hissed. You are ungrateful. I am your daughter. Mom, I said, closing my eyes. I am not your bank. I never should have been. Clara, if you hang up. I hung up. I stared at the phone. My hands were shaking, but not from cold anymore, from adrenaline. The phone rang again immediately. It was Mason. I answered. I wanted to hear it all. I wanted to drain the poison. Real profound move, sis. Mason's voice came through, dripping with that lazy arrogance that had always infuriated me. Really sticking it to the old man, huh? Cutting off the Netflix too? Going to starve us out? You are 26? Mason, I said. Pay for your own Netflix. You are really enjoying this, aren't you? He chuckled, a dark sound. Playing the victim, acting like we held a gun to your head all these years. Nobody forced you to pay for anything. Clara, you did it because you wanted us to think you were special. You wanted to be the savior. Don't blame us because you have a hero complex. The words landed like a punch to the gut. Nobody forced you. He was right, and that was the worst part. I had handed over the money willingly, desperate for a pat on the head. He had just weaponized my own generosity against me. He stripped away the illusion that I was being helpful and revealed the naked truth. I was just a sucker. You are right, Mason, I said softly. Nobody forced me, which means nobody can force me to continue. Good luck with the house. Wait, Clara, don't be a... I hung up. I looked at the contact list. Mom, block caller, Dad, block caller, Mason, block caller, Brielle, block caller. The phone went silent. The silence in the apartment was sudden and total. It was not empty. It was heavy, ringing in my ears. For the first time in 30 years, there was no demand waiting for me. There was no crisis I had to solve. There was no debt I had to cover. I walked into my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I did not cry. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean inside. I had just amputated my family. I lay back on the pillows, staring at the ceiling fan. I felt like I was floating in deep space, untethered. It was terrifying. But it was also the first time I could breathe without feeling the weight of 4 other people sitting on my chest. The next few days were a blur of motion, but not the emotional kind. I threw myself into the architecture of code. I went into the Ridgepoint offices early, before the sun was up, and stayed until the cleaning crew vacuumed around my desk. I volunteered for the on-site security audit in Denver. My boss was surprised but pleased. "You usually hate travel, Clara," he had said. "I need a change of scenery," I had replied. I packed my bag with military precision: 3 suits, laptop, secure hard drive. I treated the trip like an evacuation. I was building a wall, not a firewall of code, but a firewall of distance. I checked my bank account one more time before I boarded the plane. The balance had not moved. For 3 days, the number had stayed exactly the same. No withdrawals, no transfers, no emergency drains. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I sat in the window seat, watching the ground fall away as the plane banked over Minneapolis. I looked down at the sprawling suburbs, covered in snow, trying to spot the neighborhood where I grew up. I couldn't distinguish it from the thousands of other identical grids. From up here, the house was invisible. The drama was small. I turned away from the window and opened my laptop. I had a job to do, and for the first time in my life, the money I earned was going to stay exactly where it belonged, in my name. I thought the war was over. I thought blocking their numbers was the end of the story. I did not know that while I was in the air, down on the ground, Mason was already at the hardware store, buying a can of industrial foam. I did not know that silence was not peace. It was just the time they needed to reload. The silence lasted exactly 3 weeks. It was a fragile, pressurized silence, the kind that exists in the split second between pulling the pin on a grenade and the explosion. Then, my phone vibrated against the mahogany desk in my office at Ridgepoint. It was a group message, the family. "Elaine, family meeting tonight, 7 o'clock. You owe us at least a conversation. Clara." I stared at the screen. The wording was a masterclass in manipulation. "You owe us," not "we miss you," not "we are sorry," but a transactional demand. They had flipped the narrative before I even entered the room. In their version of reality, my refusal to be exploited was an unpaid debt I had to settle. My thumb hovered over the screen. The old programming, the code written into my brain since childhood, began to execute. The subroutine that said, "keep the peace." The algorithm that said, "be the good daughter." My heart rate spiked. I felt the physical urge to type out an apology, to ask if I should bring dessert, to smooth over the rough edges I had created. I closed my eyes and forced a reboot. I was not that person anymore. I was a firewall. I typed 2 letters. Okay, then I hit send. Before I left the office, a nagging instinct, the professional paranoia that made me good at my job, kicked in. If they were calling a formal meeting, they wanted something specific. My family did not do feelings unless there was a tangible asset attached to them. I logged into my personal secure cloud storage. I started digging through old folders, specifically the folder labeled Mortgage and Property. I remembered the year my parents bought the house. I was 24, fresh out of college with a stellar credit score, while my father was recovering from a bankruptcy he called a market correction. I opened the PDF of the original deed and the loan application. I scrolled past the boilerplate legal text until I reached the signature page. There it was. Borrower, Richard Pruitt. Co-borrower, Clara Pruitt. I froze. I remembered signing a stack of papers on the kitchen island, with Mom telling me it was just a formality to help Daddy get a better rate. I had not looked closely. I trusted them. I read the fine print. I was not just a guarantor. I was on the title. Legally, that suburban house they had so triumphantly gifted to Mason in the will was not theirs to give away. 50% of it belonged to me, and more importantly, the debt was tied to my Social Security number. If Mason missed a payment, which he would, probably within 60 days, the bank would not call him. They would come for me. A cold smile touched my lips. They were trying to exile me from a kingdom I legally co-owned. I drove to the suburbs with the printed mortgage document inside my jacket pocket. The house looked exactly the same as the night I walked out, but the atmosphere was different. The driveway was clear of snow. The porch light was on. It looked like a stage set for a sitcom about a happy family. When I walked in, the smell hit me first. Hot apple pie and cinnamon. It was a scent weapon. Mom always baked apple pie when she wanted something. It was the olfactory equivalent of a white flag that hit a sniper. "Clara," Mom said. Coming out of the kitchen, she was wearing an apron, looking soft and maternal. She did not hug me. She gestured to the living room. "Come sit. The tea is hot." They were all there. Richard in his armchair, Mason and Brielle on the sofa, and oddly, my Aunt Lydia, Dad's older sister, sitting in the corner chair, knitting. Lydia was the family outlier, a woman who watched everything and said nothing. Her presence meant they wanted a witness. They wanted an audience for my public shaming. I sat on the ottoman, keeping my coat on. "I am here," I said. "What is the agenda?" "We just want to heal," Dad said, his voice heavy with performative sadness. He poured tea into a cup but did not hand it to me. "This division, it is not us, Clara. It is not the Pruitt way." "The Pruitt way usually involves me writing a check," I said calmly. "Is that the healing you are looking for?" "See," Mason shot up, pointing a finger at me. "She is so aggressive. I told you, she thinks she is better than us because she has money." "I don't think I am better, Mason," I replied. "I think I am solvent. There is a difference." Elaine sat down next to Richard, presenting a united front. She sighed, a long, trembling exhale designed to induce guilt. "Clara," she began, her voice dropping to a whisper, "we are worried about you. You have become so cold, so transactional. We are family. We help each other. When we told you about the will, you reacted with such greed. It broke my heart." I watched her face. It was a brilliant performance. She had completely rewritten the memory of that night. In this new version, she hadn't looked me in the eye and told me I wouldn't get a cent. I had simply thrown a tantrum over money. "We want to move past this," Dad added. "We want to secure the future for everyone. Mason and Brielle are hurt. Clara, they feel like you are punishing them for our decision." "I am not punishing anyone," I said. "I am just removing myself from the equation. You said I was independent. I am agreeing with you." "But you cut off the payments," Brielle whined. "My Adobe account got canceled right in the middle of a project. I lost work. Clara, that is sabotage." "That is a billing issue," I corrected. "Update your payment method. You are 22. Brielle." Elaine held up a hand to stop the bickering. "This brings us to the point. We cannot have this uncertainty. We cannot live wondering if you are going to attack us or cut us off again. We need closure." She reached under the coffee table and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was not a will this time. It looked like something downloaded from a legal template website. "What is that?" I asked. "It is a peace treaty," Richard said. "Of sorts." Elaine slid the paper across the coffee table toward me. "Since you have made it clear you don't need our money, and since there is so much bad blood about the estate, we think it is best if we make it official. This is a waiver. It states that you voluntarily relinquish any future claim to the house, the cabin, or the family accounts. It confirms that you accept the terms of the will and will not contest it legally." I looked at the paper. It was a quitclaim, clumsily written but dangerous. "Why?" I asked, looking up. "If the will is already finalized, why do you need this?" "For peace of mind," Mom said quickly, too quickly. "So Mason and Brielle can feel secure in their future without looking over their shoulders." I realized then that they were terrified. They had spoken to a lawyer who probably told them that disinheriting a child who had financially supported the household for a decade was grounds for a messy legal battle. They wanted to strip me of my weapons before I even knew I had them. I looked at the paper, then at the mortgage document burning a hole in my pocket. I could pull it out right now. I could throw the co-ownership in their faces. I could tell them that if they wanted me to sign away the house, they would have to refinance the mortgage in their own names, something they could never do with their credit scores. I could blow this healing meeting to pieces. But I didn't, because that is what the old Clara would have done. She would have argued. She would have tried to use logic to make them see her value. The new Clara saw something else. She saw a long game. I pushed the paper back slightly, not rejecting it, but not accepting it. That is a big request, I said. My voice was neutral. Giving up my legal rights requires legal counsel. You don't need a lawyer for a family agreement, Dad said, his eyes narrowing. Lawyers just complicate things. This is a legal document, Dad, I said. I am not signing anything tonight. So you are going to drag this out? Mason sneered. You just want to control us. I will think about it, I said, standing up. I will read it over. I will let you know. Elaine's face hardened. The mask slipped again. If you walk out that door without signing, Clara, you are proving that you don't care about this family's peace. I care about the truth, I said. And the truth is, peace shouldn't require a signature. I turned to leave. The apple pie smell was now nauseating. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. They did not stop me. They just watched, angry and impotent, realizing that their ambush had failed because the victim refused to bleed. I walked out onto the porch, the cold night air hitting my face like a blessing. I closed the front door, shutting out the murmurs of their frustration. Clara? The whisper came from the shadows of the porch swing. I turned. Aunt Lydia had slipped out behind me. I hadn't even heard the door open. She was wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Lydia was Richard's sister, a woman who had lived her life on the periphery of the family drama, always present for holidays, but never involved in the fights. Aunt Lydia, I said, I am sorry you had to sit through that. She stepped into the circle of light cast by the porch lamp. Her face was lined, her eyes sharp and intelligent. She looked back at the closed door, then at me. They are scared of you, she said softly. They know they pushed too far. They should be, I said. Lydia stepped closer. She looked around the yard, checking to make sure Mason wasn't lurking nearby. You didn't sign, she stated. No. Good. She reached out and gripped my arm. Her fingers were strong. Don't sign anything they give you, and certainly don't sign away your rights to the estate. There is no estate, Lydia, I said tiredly. Mom made it clear. I get 0. Lydia leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush that sent a shiver down my spine. That is what Elaine says, she whispered. But Elaine acts like she owns the world because she thinks she buried the past. She forgets that I was there before she was. What do you mean? I asked. Your grandfather, she said. My father. When he died, everyone thought he left the farm money to Richard to manage. That is the story Elaine tells. That is how they paid for the renovations on this house. That is how they bought the cabin. I nodded. That was the family lore. Grandpa's farm sold. Dad inherited. And they used the money to invest in our future. It is a lie, Lydia said. The words hung in the cold air. What? Dad didn't trust Richard with money. He knew Richard would spend it on bad investments, and he never liked Elaine. Lydia's eyes bored into mine. He wrote a specific codicil to his will. The proceeds from the farm sale were placed in a trust, for you. My breath caught in my throat. Me? I was 19 when he died. Exactly. He wanted it to be yours when you turned 25. He knew you were the only one who actually took care of him when he was sick. He knew you were the only one with a head for numbers. I never saw a trust, I stammered. I never saw a dime. Because Elaine was the executor, Lydia hissed. She told us the trust was dissolved for family maintenance. She told your father she was managing it. But I saw the paperwork years ago. That money was yours. Clara, $200,000. They stole it? I asked, my voice barely audible. They spent it, Lydia corrected. On the house, on the cars, on Mason. They spent your inheritance to build the life they are now claiming you have no right to. She let go of my arm. If you want to fight them, Clara, don't fight them for their money, Lydia said, stepping back into the shadows. Fight them for yours. If you want the proof, call me tomorrow. I made copies before Elaine shredded the originals. I stood there on the porch, paralyzed. The mortgage in my pocket suddenly felt heavy. but it was nothing compared to the bomb Aunt Lydia had just handed me. My mother had placed her hand on her will to deny me a future, but she had placed her hands on my grandfather's will to steal my past. I walked to my car, my legs feeling like lead. I did not look back at the house. I did not look at the warm yellow windows. All I could see was a crime scene. The sadness was gone. The guilt was gone. As I started the engine, I looked at the dark road ahead. They wanted a family meeting? They wanted to talk about who owed what. "Okay," I whispered to the empty car. "Let's talk." The flight from Denver had been delayed by 2 hours, leaving me stranded on the tarmac with nothing but stale coffee and the low hum of engine exhaust. By the time I landed in Minneapolis, it was past 1 in the morning. My body ached with that specific, bone-deep fatigue that comes from sleeping in hotel beds and living out of a suitcase for 7 days. All I wanted was my own shower, my own sheets, and the silence of my apartment. I dragged my carry-on bag through the empty lobby of my building. The night concierge gave a sleepy wave as I passed, and I nodded back, too tired to speak. The elevator ride up to the 4th floor felt like it took a lifetime. I leaned my head against the cool metal wall, closing my eyes, visualizing the glass of water I was about to drink. The doors slid open. The hallway was bathed in the harsh, flickering glow of the fluorescent safety lights. It was quiet, dead quiet, the kind of silence that usually comforted me. I walked down the corridor, the wheels of my suitcase humming against the industrial carpet. I kept my head down, fishing for my keys in my purse. I knew exactly which key it was by the feel of the ridges. I had the brass tint of the metal between my thumb and forefinger as I looked up, ready to slide it into the lock. I stopped. I did not drop my keys. I did not scream. I just stood there, paralyzed, my brain struggling to process the visual information it was receiving. My door was gone. Or rather, the door existed, but the boundaries of it had been erased. A thick, bulbous, yellow substance covered the entire door frame. It looked like a grotesque, synthetic fungus had exploded from the cracks and hardened instantly. It was expanding foam, the industrial kind used for insulation and filling gaps in construction. But this wasn't a gap filler. This was a siege weapon. The foam had been sprayed aggressively into the seams between the door and the jamb, swelling out over the handle, the deadbolt, and the peephole. It had hardened into an ugly, undulating mass that looked like a tumor growing out of the wood. It was a complete seal. There was no way to insert a key. There was no way to turn the handle. My apartment had been turned into a tomb, and I was on the outside. A normal person might have panicked. A normal person might have started clawing at the foam or crying. But as I stared at the yellow mess, I felt a sensation that was entirely different. It was a coldness that started in the center of my chest and radiated out to my fingertips, freezing my nerves. It was the absolute silence of realization. This was not a prank. This was not a warning. This was an act of war. I pulled out my phone. I did not call my mother. I did not call the police. Not yet. I called the building manager's emergency line. "This is an emergency," I said when the groggy voice answered. "I am locked out of Unit 402, and you are going to need a maintenance crew." It took 45 minutes for the manager, a gruff man named Gary, to arrive with a locksmith. When they stepped off the elevator and saw my door, Gary stopped dead in his tracks and let out a low whistle. "Holy Mother of—" He trailed off, walking closer to inspect the hardened foam. He touched it with the tip of his boot. It was solid as rock. I have seen superglue in the lock before. I have seen gum. I have never seen this. This is impressive in a sick way. The locksmith, a younger guy with tattoos on his neck, shook his head as he pulled a heavy-duty utility knife and a crowbar from his bag. "This is expanding polyurethane. Once this cures, it bonds to everything. The wood, the metal, the paint. We are not just opening this door, ma'am. We are going to have to surgically remove it." For the next 2 hours, I stood in the hallway with my arms crossed, watching them work. The sound was grating. The screech of metal on metal. The crunch of the hardened foam being sliced away in chunks. It smelled of chemicals and destruction. "You must have really pissed someone off," the locksmith muttered, sweating as he leveraged the crowbar against the frame. "Ex-boyfriend? Crazy neighbor? Someone hates you a lot to go to this much trouble." I looked at the pile of yellow debris accumulating on the carpet. It looked like shed skin. "They don't hate me," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "They are just used to using me, and they don't like it when the tool stops working." The locksmith looked at me, confused, but didn't ask further questions. Finally, with a loud crack that echoed down the hallway, the seal broke. The door swung open, revealing the dark sanctuary of my apartment. The frame was ruined, splintered and stained with residue, but the space inside was untouched. "We will have to replace the whole door and the jamb tomorrow," Gary said, wiping his hands on his pants. "I will put a temporary lock on it for tonight. Do you want me to call the cops for you? File a report?" "Yes," I said, "but not yet. I need to check something first." I stepped inside. The air was stale, smelling faintly of the lavender diffuser I had left running. I didn't turn on the main lights. I didn't unpack. I didn't even take off my coat. I walked straight to my desk in the corner of the living room. My laptop was in sleep mode. I woke it up, the screen casting a blue light onto my face. My fingers flew across the keyboard. At Ridgepoint Cyber Systems. My job was to secure networks against intruders. I knew better than anyone that physical locks were just a suggestion. True security was visibility. When I moved into this apartment, I had installed a proprietary camera system. It wasn't the cheap doorbell camera that everyone had. It was a high-definition, motion-activated pinhole camera embedded in the number plate beside my door. It recorded directly to a secure server, bypassing the building's generic security loop. Nobody knew it was there, not Gary, not my neighbors, and certainly not my family. I opened the dashboard. Events detected. 1. I clicked on the timestamp. Tuesday, 11:45 p.m. The video player loaded. The image was crisp, black and white night vision but sharp enough to read the text on a flyer. The hallway was empty. Then, the elevator doors at the end of the hall opened. A figure stepped out. He was wearing a dark hoodie pulled up over a baseball cap, dark jeans, and high-top sneakers. He kept his head down as he walked, checking the doors, but I didn't need to see his face yet. I knew the walk. I knew the slouch of the shoulders, the way he dragged his heels slightly. It was Mason. I watched as he approached my door. He stopped and looked around, checking for the building's hallway cameras. He knew where they were, at the ends of the hall. He carefully positioned himself with his back to the far camera, thinking he was invisible. He didn't know he was staring directly into my lens. He pulled a large can from his hoodie pocket. It was a can of great stuff insulating foam. He shook it. And then, he did something that made my blood run cold. He laughed. It wasn't a maniacal laugh. It was a silent, shoulder-shaking chuckle. He was having fun. He looked at the can, then at my door, and I could see the grin spreading across the lower half of his face. He wasn't doing this out of blind rage. He was doing it because he found the idea of destroying my property entertaining. He was enjoying the thought of me coming home exhausted and being unable to get in. He inserted the straw into the gap of the door frame. He pressed the trigger. I watched the foam spray out, expanding rapidly. He moved the can methodically, sealing the top, then the side, then the lock. He bent down to get the bottom threshold. He was thorough. He wanted to make sure the seal was airtight. When the can was empty, he stood up and stepped back to admire his work. He took a phone out of his pocket and snapped a picture of the ruined door. Then, he turned to leave. As he turned, for 1 second, the light from the hallway caught his face under the brim of the cap. I hit the spacebar. Pause. There he was, my brother, the boy I had tutored in math, the boy whose car insurance I had canceled 3 weeks ago. His eyes were bright with malice. He looked like a child who had just set an anthill on fire and was waiting to watch the ants burn. I stared at his face on my screen. I felt a shifting inside me, like tectonic plates grinding together. The last remaining sediment of sisterly affection crumbled and fell into the abyss. This was not a family dispute. This was a criminal act performed by a stranger who shared my DNA. I didn't just watch it, I processed it. I opened my file management tools. I exported the clip in full resolution, saved to local drive, saved to encrypted USB, saved to cloud backup A, saved to cloud backup B. I zoomed in on his face, enhance, screenshot. I zoomed in on the can in his hand, enhance, screenshot. I zoomed in on his shoes, Nikes that cost $200. I remembered buying them for his birthday last year, screenshot. I created a new folder named Evidence Mason Pruitt. I dragged everything into it. Then, I picked up my phone. It was 3 a.m. now. I dialed Aunt Lydia. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Clara, is everything all right? It is late." "I need you to come to my apartment," I said. "I know it is late, but you need to see this." "Now?" "Now." Lydia arrived 40 minutes later. She was wearing a raincoat over her pajamas. When she stepped off the elevator and saw the mutilated remains of my doorframe, she gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "Good Lord," she whispered. "Did someone break in?" "No," I said, opening the door. "Someone tried to seal me out." I led her to the desk. I didn't say a word. I just pointed to the screen and pressed play. Lydia watched the footage in silence. She watched Mason walk up. She watched him shake the can. She watched him laugh. She watched the foam destroy the entrance to my home. When the video ended, Lydia didn't move. She stared at the frozen image of Mason's grinning face. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. She slowly took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She looked older than she had at the meeting. "He thinks it is a game," she said softly. "He thinks because you are family, there are no consequences. He thinks he is untouchable." "He caused $3,000 in damage," I said. "And he locked me out of my home at this isn't a game, Lydia. This is harassment." Lydia turned to look at me. Her eyes were hard, the steel of the Pruitt bloodline finally showing through. "He has crossed the line, Clara. There is no coming back from this." "I know," I said. "Your parents—" Lydia hesitated, then shook her head. "Elaine will say it was a prank. Richard will say boys will be boys. They will protect him. They will lie for him. They will blame you for provoking him." She reached out and placed her hand on my shoulder. It was a heavy, grounding weight. "You cannot let them handle this internally, Clara," she said. "If you do, he will do something worse next time. He is escalating because he is losing control over you." "I know," I repeated. "You have the evidence," Lydia said, looking back at the screen. "You have the truth about the house. You have the truth about the grandfather's will. And now you have this." She looked me dead in the eye, her expression fierce. "You have to protect yourself, Clara, because nobody else in that house is going to—" I looked at the screen one last time. I looked at the digital timestamp. I looked at the brother who was laughing at my distress. "I am going to call the police," I said. "Good," Lydia said. "Do it, and don't you dare apologize for it." I picked up the phone and dialed 911. As the operator answered, asking for my emergency, I looked at the folder on my desktop. Evidence Mason Pruitt. "I would like to report an act of vandalism and criminal mischief," I said, my voice steady, cool, and precise. "I have video evidence, and I know the perpetrator." The first precinct in downtown Minneapolis smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was a smell I usually associated with crime dramas. Not my Tuesday morning. I sat at a metal desk across from Officer Miller, a man with tired eyes and a buzz cut that showed more scalp than hair. I did not look like a victim. I was dressed in my sharpest charcoal blazer, my hair pulled back into a severe bun. On the desk between us lay 3 things: a USB drive containing the footage of Mason, a printed invoice from the emergency locksmith for $3,200, and a printed email from my building manager stating that if the door frame damage was structural, the cost could double. "So, Let me get this straight, Officer Miller said, looking up from his computer screen. The individual in the video is your brother? Yes, I said. My voice was level. Mason Pruitt. And he does not reside at the address? No, he has never lived there. He does not have a key. He was not invited. Officer Miller tapped a few keys. Ms. Pruitt, sealing a door with industrial foam constitutes criminal mischief, given the cost of the repair exceeds $1,000. In the state of Minnesota, this bumps it up from a misdemeanor to a potential felony. We are talking about first-degree damage to property. He looked at me significantly. If we file this, and the prosecutor picks it up, your brother is looking at an arrest record, fingerprints, mugshot, court dates. Are you sure you want to proceed? Usually, families try to settle this informally. I tried informally for 10 years, I said. Informally cost me my savings. Proceed with the report. Officer Miller nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. He handed me a case number on a small card. We will contact Mr. Pruitt to come in for a statement. If he refuses, we will issue a warrant. I walked out of the precinct into the cold, bright sunlight. I felt lighter. The legal system did not care about family harmony. It did not care about guilt trips. It only cared about facts. And for the first time in my life, the facts were on my side. The fallout was nuclear. I was back at my desk at Ridgepoint, analyzing a firewall breach for a client, when my phone lit up. I had unblocked them temporarily, knowing this was coming. Elaine. I answered on the first ring. I wanted them to know I was not hiding. Clara! Her voice was a shriek that practically vibrated the speaker. The police just called the house. They left a message for Mason saying he is a person of interest in a criminal investigation. What have you done? I reported a crime, I said, typing a command into my terminal as I spoke. Someone vandalized my home. I gave the police the evidence. It was a prank, Elaine screamed. He is your brother. He was just blowing off steam because he was upset about the meeting. How could you call the cops on your own blood? You are trying to ruin his life. Mason ruined my door, I corrected her. And the repair bill is $3,200, plus the emergency call-out fee, plus the cost of a hotel if the fumes don't clear. That is not a prank. Mom, that is property damage. He didn't mean any harm. He sealed me out of my apartment at 1 a.m, I said. If there had been a fire inside, I would not have been able to get in. If I had been inside and there was a fire in the hall, I would not have been able to get out. It was dangerous, and it was expensive. You have the money, she yelled. You could have just sent him the bill. Why bring the police into this? I am not sending bills anymore. Mom, remember? I am independent. You are cruel, she sobbed. You are cold and cruel. I don't even know who you are anymore. I am the person who is done paying for Mason's mistakes, I said. Tell him to call Officer Miller. I gave them his number. I hung up. My hand was steady. 10 minutes later, Richard called. My father's approach was different. He didn't scream. He used the weary, disappointed tone of a diplomat dealing with a rogue state. Clara, he sighed, we need to de-escalate this. Having police cruisers show up at the house. Think about what the neighbors will say. Think about your mother's blood pressure. I am thinking about my front door. Dad, I said. And the fact that I had to pay a locksmith to saw through polyurethane foam for 2 hours. We can handle this internally, Richard said. Drop the charges. Mason will apologize. We will figure out a way to pay you back over time. You know he doesn't have the cash right now. But don't give him a criminal record. That stays with him forever. He should have thought about his record before he bought the foam, I said. Clara, please, this is family business. Don't let outsiders determine our fate. The police aren't outsiders, Dad. They are the consequences. I took a breath. I looked at the case number card sitting on my desk. Here is the deal, I said. I will not drop the report today, but I will tell the prosecutor I am willing to accept a plea deal if, and only if, 2 conditions are met. 1. Mason pays the full amount of the repair, $3,200, by cashier's check within 48 hours. No payment plans, no IOUs. 48 hours? Clara, that is impossible, Dad sputtered. And 2, I continued, ignoring him. He writes a letter of apology, not a text, a signed letter admitting to what he did. If I get the check and the letter, I will ask the police to downgrade it to a civil dispute. If not, I let the system chew him up. You are blackmailing us, Richard said, his voice low. No, Dad, I am negotiating. You taught me that everything is a transaction, right? This is the price of my silence. I hung up on him too. Then came Mason. He didn't call. He left a voicemail because I declined the call. I listened to it on speakerphone in the privacy of my office. You think you are so smart, don't you? His voice was shaking. It was a mix of adrenaline and pure terror, masked by bravado. Calling the cops on me? Seriously? You are a psycho. Everyone knows you are the crazy one. If you don't drop this, I am going to tell everyone about you. I will post on Facebook. I will tell your boss you are unstable. I will tell everyone you are suing your own family because you are a greedy, lonely workaholic who hates that her parents love her siblings more. You want a war? You got one. I saved the voicemail. I added it to the Evidence Mason Pruitt folder. Then I sent him a single text message. Any further communication from you will be considered witness intimidation. If you have a statement to make, you can make it to my lawyer. I didn't have a lawyer yet, but I knew exactly who to call. I took an early lunch and drove to a glass-walled building in the financial district. I had an appointment with Dana Mercer. She was a legend in Minneapolis family law, known for handling high-asset divorces and nasty inheritance disputes. She wasn't the kind of lawyer who held your hand and offered tissues. She was the kind of lawyer who looked at a scorched earth and asked who brought the matches. Dana was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a suit that cost more than my first car. She sat behind a desk that was completely clear of paper, listening as I laid out the timeline. I showed her the video of the foam. I showed her the mortgage document proving I was a co-owner of the house. I told her about the will, the cut-off payments, and the threats. She watched the video of Mason laughing as he destroyed my door 3 times. Then she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. You came here because you think you have a vandalism case, Dana said. Her voice was precise, cutting through the emotion. And you do. We can nail him for that. But that is small potatoes. It doesn't feel small, I said. He attacked my home. Oh, I know, Dana said. But Clara, look at the pattern. The mortgage fraud. Using your credit to secure a loan for a house they claim is theirs. The coerced payments disguised as family help. The grandfather's will your aunt mentioned. And now, the physical intimidation when you finally closed the wallet. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. This isn't just a dysfunctional family, Dana said, turning back to me. This is a criminal enterprise operating under the guise of a household. You are not just a victim of vandalism. You are a victim of long-term financial abuse and potential estate fraud. She walked back to the desk and picked up the mortgage document I had brought. Your mother placed her hand on that will and told you that you would get nothing, Dana said, a shark-like smile appearing on her face. She made a tactical error. She assumed you were playing by the rules of family, but we are going to play by the rules of law. She slid a retainer agreement across the desk. Keep the police report active, Dana instructed. Let Mason sweat. Let your parents scramble to find that $3,000. In the meantime, we are going to draft a request for a forensic accounting of your grandfather's estate, and we are going to file a partition action on that house you co-own. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. They threatened to ruin my reputation, I said, signing my name. Let them try, Dana said, taking the paper back. By the time we are done, they are going to wish the only thing they had to worry about was a foamed-up door. I walked out of her office into the crisp afternoon air. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mom. Probably begging or screaming. I didn't look. I didn't care. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to their blows. I had hired a heavy hitter, and we were about to step into the ring. The wind off the Mississippi River was sharp enough to cut through my wool coat. I pulled my scarf tighter as I walked toward the small coffee shop Lydia had chosen. It was located in a quiet part of the Northeast District, tucked away from the main roads, a place where people went when they did not want to be seen. Inside, the windows were fogged with condensation, blurring the world outside into gray shapes. Aunt Lydia was sitting in a booth at the back. She had a cup of black tea in front of her, the steam rising in lazy spirals. Her hands were wrapped around the ceramic mug, as if she were trying to thaw a chill that came from inside her bones. On the table, sitting ominously next to the sugar dispenser, was a thick manila envelope. I slid into the booth opposite her. The cafe smelled of roasted beans and damp coats. "You came," Lydia said. She did not smile. She looked tired, her face drawn with the weight of what she was about to do. "You said you had the truth," I replied, unwinding my scarf. "I am done with lies. Lydia, so if this is another attempt to explain why Mom acts the way she does, or why Dad is just misunderstood, I am going to walk out." Lydia shook her head. She pushed the envelope across the scratched wooden table. It made a heavy, dry sound. "Open it," she said. I picked it up. It felt significant. I undid the metal clasp and pulled out a stack of papers. They were photocopies, but the stamps and signatures were clear. It was a last will and testament. Specifically, the last will and testament of Arthur Vance, my grandfather. I remembered Grandpa Art. He was a quiet man with rough hands who smelled of tobacco and sawdust. He had died 8 years ago. A slow, agonizing decline in a nursing home that smelled of antiseptic. I was 21 then. I was the one who drove him to his dialysis appointments 3 times a week because Mom was too busy with Mason's soccer practice and Dad was working on a deal. I was the one who sat by his bed and read him the newspaper when his eyes failed. When he died, Elaine had gathered us in the living room and told us, with a somber face, that Grandpa had died penniless. She said the nursing home costs had eaten everything. She said there was nothing left but his old watch, which she gave to Mason, who lost it a week later. I turned to the 3rd page of the document. Lydia reached out and pointed a trembling finger at a specific paragraph. Article 4, Distribution of Assets. I read the words, then I read them again. The legal jargon was dense, but the meaning was inescapable. To my daughter, Elaine Pruitt, I leave the sum of $1, for reasons she and I both understand. To my granddaughter, Clara Pruitt, who was the only one to sit with me when the days were long, I leave the entirety of the proceeds from the sale of the Vance Farm property in Stearns County, along with the balance of my Vanguard investment account. I looked up at Lydia. My vision blurred for a second. "The farm?" I whispered. "Mom said the bank took the farm." "The bank did not take the farm," Lydia said, her voice hard. "Dad sold the farm 6 months before he died. He knew he was dying. He liquidated it. The money was sitting in a trust account, $185,000, plus another $40,000 in the investment fund, $225,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. That was a fortune to a 21-year-old. That money would have paid for my college. It would have paid for my first apartment. It would have meant I did not have to work 2 jobs while taking a full course load. "Where did it go?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Elaine was the executor," Lydia said, looking down at her tea. "She had power of attorney in the final weeks. She told the lawyer that you were aware of the arrangement, that the money was being moved into a family holding account to avoid taxes. She forged your signature on the release forms, Clara." "She forged my signature?" My voice rose, attracting a glance from the barista. I lowered it to a hiss. "That is a felony. Lydia." "I know," Lydia said. "She took the money, and do you know what she did with it? She didn't save it. She didn't invest it." Lydia leaned forward, her eyes flashing with a decade of suppressed anger. "She used it to pay off the arrears on their mortgage so they wouldn't lose the house. She used it to buy that cabin on the lake because she wanted to impress her friends. She used it to buy Mason his first car. She used your money, Clara, your inheritance, and then, when that money ran out, she started asking you for more. I sat back against the vinyl booth. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. For years, I had felt guilty. I had felt like I owed them. I thought I was the successful daughter helping her struggling parents. But I wasn't helping them. I was being cannibalized. They had stolen my start in life, spent it on luxuries for themselves and my siblings, and then, when the well ran dry, they had tapped my veins for fresh blood. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. The betrayal I felt toward Lydia was sharp, a different kind of pain. You knew for 8 years. I was a coward, Lydia admitted. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. I saw how Richard was. I knew if I exposed Elaine, she would cut me off from the family. I wanted to see my nieces and nephews grow up. I told myself it was just money. I told myself you were smart, that you would make your own way. She reached across the table, but I pulled my hand away. But then, Lydia continued, her voice shaking, I watched that video. I watched Mason destroy your door. I saw the look on his face. It was the same look Elaine had when she cashed that check from the farm sale. It was entitlement. Clara, pure, rot-filled entitlement. They think you exist to serve them. And I realized that if I didn't speak up now, they would bleed you dry until there was nothing left. It is too late for an apology, Lydia, I said coldly. I know, she said. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am giving you ammunition. She tapped the envelope. This is the certified copy. The lawyer who drafted it retired, but I tracked down his records. I have the bank statements showing the transfer from the trust to Elaine's personal account. I have the dates. I have everything. I looked at the papers. This wasn't just evidence of a bad mother. This was evidence of grand larceny, fraud, forgery. I stood up. I didn't drink my coffee. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. The heavy, crushing weight of the ungrateful daughter label had vanished. In its place was a cold, burning clarity. I wasn't ungrateful. I was a victim of a long con. Thank you, I said to Lydia. I picked up the envelope. You should probably go home, and you should probably stop answering Mom's calls. What are you going to do? Lydia asked, looking up at me with fear in her eyes. I am going to get what is mine, I said. I drove straight to Dana Mercer's office. I didn't even call for an appointment. I walked past the receptionist and straight into Dana's glass-walled sanctuary. She was on the phone, but when she saw my face and the thick envelope in my hand, she hung up without saying goodbye. What happened? Dana asked, standing up. I threw the envelope onto her pristine desk. My grandfather didn't die broke. Dana opened the envelope. She read the will. She looked at the bank transfer records Lydia had included. She looked at the dates. She looked at the amounts. As she read, her professional demeanor shifted. Her eyes widened. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face. This was not the smile of a friend. It was the smile of a general who had just been handed the enemy's encryption codes. Oh, Dana said softly. Oh, this is beautiful. Beautiful? I asked, pacing the room. My mother stole $200,000 from me and used it to buy a cabin for my sister. How is that beautiful? Because, Dana said, looking up, it changes everything. Yesterday, we had a vandalism case and a dispute over a mortgage. Today we have a case for constructive trust, fraud, embezzlement, and unjust enrichment. We can freeze their assets. We can go after the cabin. We can go after the house. She stood up and walked over to the whiteboard on her wall. She picked up a red marker. Elaine placed her hand on her will and told you that you wouldn't get a cent, right? Dana asked. Yes. Well, Dana uncapped the marker. Here is the irony. The assets she is claiming to give away in that will, the house, the cabin, the savings, if we can prove they were purchased or maintained with stolen funds, your funds, then legally, those assets don't belong to her. They are the fruit of a poisonous tree. She wrote Grandpa's trust at the top of the board, then drew an arrow down to house and cabin. She cannot disinherit you from property that she bought with your money, Dana said. In fact, if we push this hard enough, a judge could rule that the house and the cabin are effectively yours right now. She is holding them in trust for you. I stared at the whiteboard. The house I was banned from. The cabin I wasn't allowed to visit. They weren't just family property, they were my property, stolen and repurposed to hurt me. So what do we do? I asked. Do we sue them now? No, Dana said, capping the marker. We don't sue yet. Lawsuits take years. We want a surrender. She walked back to her desk and sat down, her eyes gleaming. They want a family meeting, right? They want you to sign that waiver? They want peace? Yes, I said. Then we are going to give them a meeting, Dana said. But we are going to change the venue, and we are going to change the agenda. She pulled a fresh legal pad toward her. We are going to invite them to a settlement conference. We will tell them you are ready to discuss the terms of separation. They will think you are capitulating. They will think you are coming to sign the waiver and apologize for the police report. And when they get there? When they get there, Dana said, we play the video of Mason, and then we put this will on the table, and we tell Elaine that she has two choices. Option A. She signs over the house and the cabin to you immediately to repay the stolen inheritance, plus interest. Option B. We file criminal charges for fraud and forgery, and she spends her retirement in a courtroom, and possibly a cell. I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was ruthless. It was devastating. It was exactly what they deserved. Do we really have enough to send her to jail? I asked. The statute of limitations. For fraud? Maybe, Dana said. But the threat? The threat is real, and the public humiliation, the ruin of her reputation in that perfect little suburban town, that is the lever. Clara, Elaine cares more about her image than her soul. We are going to hold a mirror up to her, and she is going to shatter. I looked at the envelope on the desk. I thought about the grandfather who had squeezed my hand in the nursing home, worried about my future. He had tried to protect me, and for 8 years, I had let his memory be twisted into a lie. Set it up, I said to Dana. Let's have a family meeting. Dana nodded and reached for her phone. I will book the conference room. And Clara? Yes? Wear something expensive. It makes people nervous. I walked out of the office and into the late afternoon sun. The city looked different now. The buildings looked sharper. The noise of the traffic sounded like music. I wasn't just a victim of a bad family anymore. I was the plaintiff, and court was about to be in session. The hum of the laser printer was the only sound in my apartment for 3 hours. It was a rhythmic, mechanical pulse that felt less like office work and more like the loading of a magazine into a weapon. I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by a sea of paper, building a monument to my own exploitation. Dana had told me that in a court of law, feelings are irrelevant. Judges do not care about broken hearts or mommy issues. They care about documentation. They care about the paper trail. So, I decided to give them a highway. I had logged into my bank's archival system, paying the extra fees to access statements going back 10 years. I downloaded everything. Then, I pulled the data into a spreadsheet. I am a cybersecurity analyst. Finding patterns in chaos is what I do. I color-coded the transactions. Red for direct cash transfers to Elaine or Richard. Yellow for bills paid on their behalf. Mortgage, utilities, insurance. Blue for loans to Mason and Brielle. When I summed the columns, the total made me physically ill. It was not just the $225,000 from Grandpa's stolen trust. It was another $140,000 of my own earnings, siphoned off over a decade in increments of $50, $100, or $500. I printed the spreadsheet. It was 12 pages long. I called it the map. Next came the communication logs. I dug into my old email server, searching for keywords. Help, borrow, temporary, urgent. I found the email from 7 years ago, the smoking gun regarding the house. Subject, just a formality. Honey, from Elaine Pruitt at March 12th, 2018. Clara, the mortgage broker says we just need your signature to get the lower rate. It is purely technical. Dad and I will handle all the payments. Obviously, you will just be a silent partner on paper. It helps the family so much. Please sign the attached. I printed it. I highlighted the line, Dad and I will handle all the payments. Then I stapled it to the bank statement from 3 months later, showing the first of 64 mortgage payments deducted from my account because Dad and I had insufficient funds. I found the emails from Mason asking for tuition money for the graphic design course. I found the emails from Brielle begging for the camera equipment, promising to pay me back with her first sponsorship check, a check that never came, even though I knew she was making money. Dana took all of this. She did not just stack it, she curated it. We sat in her conference room the next afternoon, and she organized the documents into 3 distinct binders. They looked like government dossiers. This is not a disorganized domestic dispute anymore, Dana said, sliding a plastic sheet protector over the police report regarding the vandalism. This is a forensic audit. We tackled the vandalism evidence next. I had the high-resolution photos of the foam-covered door. I had the invoice from the emergency locksmith, $3,240. I had the email from Gary, the building manager, stating that the door frame damage compromised the fire rating of the unit entrance and required a full replacement. I had the case number from the Minneapolis Police Department. Dana drafted a settlement demand that was terrifying in its precision. It was not a plea, it was an ultimatum. The settlement proposal: 1. Immediate reimbursement of $3,240 for property damage caused by Mason Pruitt. 2. Acknowledgement of the $225,000 misappropriated from the Arthur Vance Trust. 3. Immediate transfer of title for the cabin property to Clara Pruitt as partial restitution for the stolen trust funds. 4. A reformulation of the parents' current will to recognize Clara's 50% ownership stake in the family home, securing her investment against future liquidation. And if they refuse? I asked, reading the draft. Then we file, Dana said, capping her pen. We file the police report for felony criminal mischief against Mason. We file the civil suit for fraud and conversion against Elaine. And we file a partition action to force the sale of the house so you can extract your equity. We burn the village to save it. My phone buzzed on the mahogany table. It was Elaine, again. She had been texting me nonstop for 2 days, unaware that I was currently sitting with a lawyer drafting the destruction of her financial house of cards. Clara, this silence is childish. We are having a family meeting tomorrow night. You need to come and apologize to your brother for calling the police. You are scaring him. He is just a boy. Don't be a cold-hearted sister. Come home and fix this. I looked at the text. Cold-hearted. Fix this. The old Clara would have crumbled. The old Clara would have felt the guilt clawing at her throat, terrified of being the villain in her mother's narrative. But as I looked at the 12-page spreadsheet of stolen money, I felt nothing but a cool, detached resolve. She called me cold? Fine. I would show her exactly how cold the truth could be. She wants a meeting, I told Dana. Perfect, Dana smiled. We love meetings. Tell her you will be there. I typed a reply. I will be there. 7 p.m. I did not mention I was bringing a lawyer. I did not mention I was bringing the witness to her grand larceny, Aunt Lydia. I did not mention that I wasn't coming to apologize, but to deliver a surrender treaty. The preparation for the meeting felt like planning a heist. Dana, Lydia, and I coordinated our arrival. Lydia would arrive 10 minutes early, acting as the nervous, silent observer to lull them into a false sense of security. I would arrive at 7 sharp. Dana would wait in her car down the street and enter 5 minutes after me. Once the family dynamic had established itself, we wanted to catch them in their natural state, arrogant and accusatory, before Dana walked in and sucked the oxygen out of the room with the law. I spent the evening before the meeting in my apartment. The new door had been installed that morning. It was pristine, painted a sterile white, the smell of fresh lacquer still hanging in the hallway. I stood in the corridor and ran my hand over the wood. It was smooth. There was no foam, no yellow scars. I realized something profound as I touched that surface. For 30 years, My fear of losing my family had been the leash they used to choke me. I had paid every bill, forgiven every slight, and swallowed every insult because I was terrified of being orphaned. I was scared that if I stopped paying, they would stop loving me. But looking at the invoices in my hand, I realized they had never loved me. They loved the utility I provided. You do not love an appliance. You just get mad when it stops working. The fear evaporated. It didn't leave a hole. It left a clean, open space. I didn't need them. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their forgiveness. I had my own home, my own career, and my own life. They were the ones who needed me. They needed my credit score. They needed my silence. They needed my compliance to keep their delusions of middle-class success afloat. I walked back inside and packed my briefcase. It was a black leather case, sturdy and professional. I placed the 3 binders inside. Binder 1, the financial abuse map. Binder 2, the vandalism evidence. Binder 3, the stolen trust and grandfather's real will. I added the USB drive with the video of Mason. I added a copy of the mortgage deed. I clicked the latches shut. The sound was a solid, heavy thud that echoed in the quiet apartment. I wasn't packing papers. I was packing the past. I was boxing up every lie, every gaslight, every manipulated moment of the last decade, and I was preparing to drop it onto their coffee table. I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. I looked tired, but my eyes were clear. I pulled my hair back. I chose my outfit for tomorrow carefully. A navy blue suit, sharp heels, no jewelry. I wasn't dressing for dinner. I was dressing for court. I turned off the lights and went to bed, sleeping soundly for the first time in weeks, tomorrow. I was going back to the house with the white picket fence, but I wasn't going as a daughter. I was going as the plaintiff, and I was going to make sure that by the time I left, they understood exactly what it cost to betray the person who paid for the roof over their heads. The atmosphere inside the house had shifted violently since my last visit. 2 weeks ago, it had been a stage set for a seduction, all flickering candlelight, roast turkey, and crystal wine glasses designed to soften the blow of my disinheritance. Tonight, the house had been stripped of its theater. The dining room table was bare except for a thick stack of manila folders and a laser printer that sat on the sidebar. Its cooling fans still whirring with a low, electric hum. The air smelled of ozone and stale coffee. Not apple pie. My father, Richard, sat at the head of the table, his posture rigid. He looked like a man waiting for a biopsy result. Mason and Brielle were slumped in their chairs, scrolling on their phones, but their knees were bouncing, a nervous, kinetic energy that vibrated through the floorboards. Aunt Lydia sat in the corner armchair, her knitting needles silent in her lap, watching the room with the unblinking intensity of a hawk. Elaine was standing. She wore a stiff gray blazer I had never seen before, something that looked like it belonged to a bank manager. When I walked in, she did not offer to take my coat. She did not offer tea. She pointed to the empty chair opposite her. "Sit down, Clara," she said. Her voice was not the shrill shriek from the phone calls. It was smooth, hard, and terrifyingly composed. It was the voice of a woman who believed she had regained the upper hand. I sat. I placed my black leather briefcase on the floor beside me, keeping it close to my leg. "We are not here to argue tonight," Elaine began, clasping her hands on the table. "We are here to finalize things. Your father and I have discussed your behavior, the police report, the threats, the disrespect. We are willing to overlook it as a temporary lapse in judgment caused by your emotions." She slid a thick document across the polished wood toward me. It was still warm from the printer. "We prepared this agreement," she said, her tone almost benevolent. "It is a standard family settlement. It states that you accept the terms of the will as we explain them. It states that you acknowledge having no claim to the house or the cabin, and most importantly, it includes a clause where you agree to drop all pending police reports and waive your right to sue any family member for any reason, past or present." She picked up a pen and placed it on top of the paper. "Sign this, Clara. We will fax it to the precinct to clear Mason's name, and then we can all go back to being a family. We can put this ugly chapter behind us." I looked down at the paper. It wasn't a settlement. It was a suicide note for my legal rights. It was a quit-claim and release of liability, drafted by someone who had clearly Googled legal terms but didn't understand how enforceable they were. It was a trap, clumsy and brutal, disguised as a peace offering. "You want me to sign away my rights to everything?" I asked, looking up at her. "In exchange for what? Your forgiveness?" "In exchange for your place in this family," Richard said from the end of the table. "If you drag your brother into court, Clara, you are done. You are dead to us. This is your off-ramp. Take it." "It is a generous offer," Mason sneered, not looking up from his phone. "Considering you tried to have me arrested." I reached out and touched the paper. I didn't pick up the pen. "I cannot sign this," I said quietly. "Why not?" Elaine demanded, her eyes narrowing. "Because I don't understand the legal implications," I said, checking my watch. It was 7:10. "And my counsel advised me never to sign anything without him present." "Counsel?" Elaine let out a sharp, derisive laugh. "Oh, Clara, stop acting like this is a corporate merger. You don't have counsel. You have a grudge." The doorbell didn't ring. I had left the front door unlocked when I entered, a calculated breach of security. The heavy oak door swung open, and the sound of confident clicking heels echoed on the hardwood floor of the entryway. Dana Mercer walked into the dining room. She looked impeccable in a cream-colored suit that screamed money and aggression. She carried a slim briefcase and wore an expression of polite boredom. The room went dead silent. Richard stood up so fast his chair screeched against the floor. Elaine looked from me to Dana, her face draining of color. "Who is this?" Richard demanded. "Who are you? You cannot just walk into my house." "Actually, the door was open," Dana said, her voice smooth and projecting easily to the back of the room. "I am Dana Mercer. I am Clara's attorney. She asked me to join us to review this agreement you are proposing." Dana walked over to the table, picked up the document Elaine had slid toward me, and scanned it for exactly 3 seconds before dropping it back onto the table with a look of distaste. "Garbage," Dana said. "Unenforceable, coercive, and frankly, poorly written. Who drafted this? You, Richard?" "Get out," Elaine hissed. She was shaking now, a tremor running through her hands. "This is a private family matter. You have no right to be here. Get out of my house." "It stopped being a private family matter when you presented my client with a legal contract to sign," Dana replied, pulling out the chair next to me and sitting down uninvited. "And it certainly stopped being private when your son committed a felony against my client's property. So, we are staying." "I am calling the police," Mason said, standing up, trying to look menacing but only looking like a scared kid in a hoodie. "Go ahead," Dana said, turning to him with a shark-like smile. "Officer Miller at the 1st Precinct would love to know exactly where you are. He has been trying to serve you with a warrant for 48 hours. Mason sat back down. He looked at Elaine, panic flaring in his eyes. Elaine realized she was losing the room. The narrative she had constructed, the firm but loving mother correcting a wayward daughter, was collapsing under the weight of a stranger's presence. She needed to reassert dominance. She needed to remind everyone who held the ultimate power. She took a deep breath, her chest heaving. She reached for the gray folder that sat near the printer. The same gray folder from that first night. The will. She slammed her hand down onto it. The sound was a dull thud that silenced the room. She leaned over the table, her knuckles turning white as she pressed down on the paper, anchoring herself to the only authority she had left. She looked at me. Her eyes were wild, burning with a mix of fury and fear. "You bring a lawyer into my house?" She spat the words out. "You think that changes anything? You think you can intimidate me with a suit and a briefcase?" She pressed harder on the folder. "I told you once, and I will tell you again, in front of your lawyer, in front of God, and in front of everyone," Elaine declared, her voice rising to a crescendo. My mom placed her hand on the will and looked me straight in the eye. "You won't get a single cent." She held the pose. It was theatrical. It was meant to be the final gavel strike. "The house is Mason's," she shouted. "The cabin is Brielle's. The money is theirs. You are out. Clara, you are nothing. You get nothing. Now take your lawyer and get out." Brielle smirked, a nasty little twist of her lips. Mason let out a breathy laugh, relaxing into his chair, confident that Mommy had just nuked the enemy. They thought it was over. They thought the magic words, "You won't get a single cent," were a spell that made me disappear. I did not move. I did not flinch. I looked at my mother's hand resting on that folder, clutching it like a lifeline. "Are you finished?" I asked. Elaine blinked, taken aback by my lack of reaction. "What?" "I asked if you were finished," I repeated. I reached down and picked up my briefcase. I set it on the table. It was heavy. I unlatched the silver clasps. Click, click. I opened the lid. I took out the USB drive. It was small, silver, and innocuous. I placed it gently on the center of the table, right next to the peace treaty they wanted me to sign. Then I took out the black binders. 1, 2, 3. I stacked them neatly. "Dana," I said softly. Dana opened her laptop. She didn't speak. She connected the USB drive. She turned the laptop around so the screen faced Elaine, Richard, and Mason. "You mentioned that Mason's little incident was a prank," I said, my voice steady. "You mentioned that I was reacting emotionally. You said he didn't mean any harm." "It was a joke," Mason muttered, but his voice cracked. "Let's watch the joke," I said. Dana hit the spacebar. The audio was the first thing to hit them. In the quiet dining room, the sound was amplified. The sharp hiss of the aerosol can, the wet, slapping sound of the expanding foam hitting the wood. On the screen, the black and white night vision footage was crisp. There was Mason, clear as day. He wasn't looking remorseful. He wasn't blowing off steam. Then came the laugh. It rang out from the laptop speakers, a cruel, self-satisfied chuckle that echoed off the dining room walls. It was the sound of someone who enjoyed destruction. I watched Elaine's face. She stared at the screen, her eyes wide. She watched her boy, the one she claimed was a victim, laughing as he sealed her daughter inside a tomb. The video played on. Mason stopped to take a selfie with the ruined door. He gave a thumbs up to the camera he didn't know was there. Dana paused the video on that frame. Mason's grinning face, the thumbs up, the destroyed door. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavier than the silence of the first dinner. This was the silence of a lie being strangled by the truth. Mason had gone pale, his skin the color of old dough. Brielle was staring at her lap. Richard had covered his mouth with his hand. And Elaine? Her hand was still on the will, but her grip had loosened. Her eyes were locked on the screen, on the undeniable proof that her son wasn't a martyr. He was a criminal. "That is a felony," Dana said, her voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. "First-degree criminal damage to property, up to 5 years in prison, and a $10,000 fine. That is what you are protecting, Elaine." He didn't mean it," Elaine whispered, but the conviction was gone. Her voice was thin, fragile. "He meant it enough to take a picture," I said. I reached for the first black binder, the one labeled The Arthur Vance Trust. I slid it across the table until it hit the edge of the will Elaine was guarding. "And speaking of things people didn't mean," I said, "let's talk about Grandpa Art and the $200,000 you stole from me 8 years ago." Elaine recoiled as if the binder were radioactive. She pulled her hand back from the will as if it burned her. The power in the room didn't just shift, it capsized. The table had turned, and I was the one holding the gavel now. Dana allowed the silence following the video to hang in the air for 5 full seconds. It was a suffocating, heavy silence, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. She closed the laptop with a sharp snap that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "That," Dana said, gesturing to the closed computer, "is Exhibit A in a criminal court. That video is not a prank. It is a confession." Mason shifted in his chair. His face flushed. "It was a joke," he stammered, his voice rising in pitch. "I was just messing around. I was going to clean it up. You are blowing this way out of proportion." "The invoice for the repair is $3,240, Dana replied, her tone conversational but deadly. The emergency call-out fee was another $400. In the state of Minnesota, damage exceeding $1,000 is a felony. First-degree criminal damage to property. It carries a sentence of up to 5 years in prison." She turned her gaze to Richard and Elaine. "If Clara proceeds with the report she filed, Mason will be arrested. He will have a criminal record. He will never pass a background check for a job. And since he appears to be unemployed and living off family support, I imagine a felony conviction will not help his future prospects." "You would put your own brother in jail?" Elaine whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of horror and fury. "Over a door?" "I would put a vandal in jail for destroying my home," I said calmly. "The fact that we share DNA is a biological accident, not a legal defense." "This is ridiculous," Mason shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You are bluffing. You won't do it." "Try me," I said. Dana held up a hand. "We are not done. That was just the warm-up." She reached for the first black binder I had placed on the table. She opened it with deliberate slowness. The sound of the plastic page protector turning was crisp. "Let us talk about the Arthur Vance Trust," Dana said. Elaine froze. It was subtle, but I saw it. Her pupils dilated. Her spine stiffened against the back of the chair. Dana pulled out a photocopy of the document Lydia had given me. She slid it across the table, spinning it so it faced Richard. "This is the last will and testament of Clara's grandfather," Dana explained. "The real one, not the version Elaine summarized for the family 8 years ago. You will notice Article 4. It specifically bequeaths the proceeds of the Vance Farm sale to Clara Pruitt." Richard looked down at the paper. He read the lines, his brow furrowed. He looked at Elaine. "Elaine, what is this?" "It is a forgery," Elaine snapped, looking away. "Dad changed his mind at the end. He told me to use the money for the family, for everyone." "He did not change his mind," a voice said from the corner. We all turned. Aunt Lydia had stopped knitting. She was sitting up straight, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair. "He wanted that money for Clara," Lydia said clearly. "He told me explicitly. He said Clara was the only one who cared about him, not his wallet. You knew that. Elaine, you stood in the kitchen the day after the funeral and told me you were going to handle it. I didn't know handling it meant stealing it." "Shut up, Lydia," Elaine shouted, her composure cracking. "You were always jealous. You don't know what you're talking about." "I have the bank transfer records," Dana interjected, sliding another sheet of paper across the table. "Here is the transfer of $225,000 from the trust account to a personal checking account in the name of Elaine Pruitt, dated 3 weeks after Arthur's death." Dana pointed to a second column. "And here are the outflows. $30,000 to a contractor for home renovations, $40,000 for a cabin down payment, $20,000 to a car dealership for a vehicle registered to Mason Pruitt." Dana looked up, locking eyes with my mother. "That is called embezzlement. Elaine, it is also fraud, and since you used the mail and wire transfers to move the money, we could arguably look at wire fraud statutes. You took money that legally belonged to your daughter and used it to buy the assets you are now claiming to disinherit her from." "It does not matter," Elaine shrieked, standing up. "It was family money. I used it to keep this family afloat. We needed that money. Clara was young. She didn't need it then." "It was not yours to take," I said. "You stole my education. You stole my security. And you used it to buy Mason a car he crashed 6 months later." "So what?" Mason sneered, though he looked sweating now. "That was years ago. You cannot sue for something that happened 8 years ago. Statute of limitations, right?" He looked at Dana, hoping he had found a loophole. Dana smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "Actually, in cases of fraud where the victim was deceived, The clock starts ticking when the fraud is discovered. Dana corrected him. Clara discovered it 3 days ago. We are well within the window to file a civil suit for conversion, unjust enrichment, and breach of fiduciary duty. We can sue you for the principal amount plus interest. By my calculation, you owe Clara close to $350,000. Richard's face had gone gray. He was doing the math. He knew they didn't have that kind of money. But wait, Dana said. There is more. She opened the second binder. This was the one containing the mortgage documents. You keep talking about your house, Dana said to Richard. You keep threatening to cut Clara out of your estate. You just tried to force her to sign a quitclaim deed. She slid the mortgage deed across the table. It landed on top of the fake will. Clara is not just a beneficiary you can cut out, Dana said. Clara is the co-owner of this property. Richard stared at the document. He saw his signature next to mine. We just used her credit, Richard stammered. It was just for the rate. She didn't put money down. She has paid the mortgage for the last 5 years, I said, my voice cutting through his excuses. I checked the records. Dad, every time you were short, I covered it. Every loan I sent you went straight to the bank. I have paid for at least 40% of the equity in this house directly. Legally, Dana continued, Clara is on the title. You cannot leave this house to Mason and Brielle because you do not own it in full. If you try to transfer the deed to them, Clara can block it. In fact, Clara can file a partition action tomorrow. She can force the sale of this house to retrieve her share of the equity. The room spun into chaos. The reality of the situation finally hit them. They weren't holding a meeting to dictate terms to a wayward daughter. They were sitting in a trap they had built for themselves. You can't sell the house, Brielle cried out, looking up from her phone, her eyes wide with genuine fear. Where would I live? I can't afford rent. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you helped Mom draft a will that cut me out, I said to her. This is insane. Mason stood up, pacing the room. You are trying to destroy us. You are ruining everything, just because you are bitter. Sit down, Mason, Richard barked. It was the first time he had spoken with authority all night. He looked at the documents spread across the table, the video evidence, the stolen trust, the mortgage deed. He realized they were completely outgunned. What do you want? Richard asked, looking at Dana. You didn't come here just to brag. You have a play. We do, Dana said. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single, crisp document. It was stapled and bound in blue legal backing. This is a settlement agreement and mutual release, Dana said. It is a real one, not the garbage you tried to make Clara sign. She placed it in the center of the table. Here are the terms, Dana said, ticking them off on her fingers. Whilst you acknowledge the debt owed to Clara from the Arthur Vance Trust, since you don't have the cash to repay the $350,000, you will transfer the title of the lake cabin to Clara immediately. The cabin is valued at roughly that amount. It settles the debt. No, Brielle screamed. The cabin is mine. Mom promised it to me. It was bought with Clara's money, Dana said coldly. It is hers. 2, Dana continued, ignoring Brielle. You will redraft your wills immediately. You will acknowledge Clara's 50% ownership of this house. When you pass, or if you sell the house, Clara gets 50% of the proceeds off the top, before any other distribution to Mason or Brielle. Elaine was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. You are taking everything. 3, Dana said, turning to Mason. Mason signs a confession admitting to the vandalism. He agrees to pay the $3,200 for the repair within 30 days. If he pays, and if he signs, Clara agrees not to press criminal charges. The video stays on a hard drive, not in a courtroom. And if we don't sign? Richard asked, his voice hollow. If you don't sign, Dana said, leaning forward, we walk out of here tomorrow morning. I file the felony report against Mason. I file the fraud lawsuit against Elaine. And I file the partition action to force the immediate sale of this house at a public auction. You will lose the cabin. You will lose the house. Mason will go to jail. and Elaine will be deposed about why she stole from a dead man. The silence that followed was total. I looked at my family. They looked small. They looked defeated. The arrogance of the family meeting had evaporated, leaving behind 4 people who realized they had been living on a line of credit I had finally cut. "You are destroying this family," Elaine whispered, staring at the will she had slammed her hand on earlier. "My mother would be ashamed of you." "Your mother isn't the one who stole from her father," I said, "and she isn't the one who tried to cheat her daughter." I stood up. "You have 24 hours to review it with a lawyer if you want," I said, "but honestly, I wouldn't waste the money. You are going to need it for the moving van if you don't sign." I looked at Mason, who was staring at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. "The video is really clear. Mason," I said, "you look like you were having so much fun. I wonder if the judge will find it as funny as you did." I picked up my briefcase. Dana stood up beside me. "We will wait for your call," Dana said. We turned and walked toward the door. The sound of our heels on the hardwood was the only sound in the house. As we reached the entryway, I paused and looked back at the dining room one last time. The candles were gone. The feast was gone. All that was left was a table covered in evidence and a family that had finally run out of people to blame. "Let's go," I said to Dana. We walked out into the cool night air. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind us. It sounded like the closing of a vault. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in 10 years, the air didn't taste like guilt. It tasted like freedom. "Wait." The single word cracked through the tension just as my hand touched the brass knob of the front door. It was not shouted. It was a plea, raspy and desperate. I stopped. I did not turn around immediately. Beside me, Dana paused, her eyebrow arching in a silent question. She checked her watch, signaling that the clock on our offer was already ticking. We turned back. The scene in the dining room had devolved from a power struggle into a wake. The bravado was gone. The threats were gone. All that remained were the cold, hard numbers of a balance sheet that no longer added up in their favor. Richard was the one who had spoken. He was looking at the documents spread across the table. The police report, the mortgage deed, the evidence of the stolen trust. He looked older than I had ever seen him. The illusion of the capable patriarch had dissolved, revealing a frightened man who realized he was standing on a trapdoor. "Elaine," Richard said, his voice trembling. He did not look at me. He looked at his wife. "We have to sign." "Richard!" Elaine gasped, her face streaked with mascara. "You cannot be serious. You are going to let her dictate terms to us? In our own house?" "It is not our house. Elaine!" Richard snapped, slamming his hand on the table. The violence of the gesture made Mason jump. "Did you not hear the lawyer? Clara owns half of it, and we owe her $350,000 we do not have. If we go to court, we lose everything. We lose the house. We lose the cabin. And you?" He stopped, glancing at Mason, then back to Elaine. "You could go to prison for fraud, Elaine, and Mason goes to jail for the vandalism. Is that what you want? Do you want to be the mother who sent her son to jail because she was too proud to admit she stole from her father?" The room went deadly quiet. The truth, stripped of all the family loyalty sugarcoating, was ugly and undeniable. Elaine looked at me. Her eyes were red, filled with a mixture of hatred and grief. She was cornered. For 30 years, she had controlled the family narrative. She was the martyr. She was the manager. She was the one who decided who was worthy and who was a burden. Now, she was just a defendant. "You are doing this on purpose," she sobbed, but it was a weak, manipulative cry. "You are choosing money over your family. You are choosing to hurt us because you are cold. You have always been cold." I watched her cry, a year ago. Those tears would have crushed me. I would have written a check just to make them stop. But tonight, I saw them for what they were, a tactical defense mechanism. "I am not choosing money," I said, my voice steady in the quiet room. "I am choosing consequences. You spent my entire life teaching me that everything has a price. Well, Mom, the bill has finally come due." Elaine looked down at the gray folder under her hand. The will she had used as a weapon. The document she had slammed down to tell me I was worthless. Her knuckles were white. That hand was the last symbol of her authority. As long as she held on to it, she could pretend she was still the matriarch. "Sign the agreement, Elaine," Richard whispered. "Please, before they walk out." For a long, agonizing minute, the only sound was the wind rattling the window panes. Elaine trembled. Then, with a slow, jerky motion, she lifted her hand. She pulled her fingers back from the gray folder. She let go. It was a small gesture, physically, but emotionally, it was an earthquake. The moment her hand left that paper, the power dynamic in the room shattered. She slumped back in her chair, defeated, looking small and withered. "Fine," she whispered. "Draw up the papers." 36 hours later, the atmosphere was entirely different. We were seated in the conference room of Dana Mercer's law firm. The air was cool and smelled of lemon polish and expensive leather. There were no emotional outbursts here. There was only the rustle of high-quality bond paper and the scratching of pens. I sat on one side of the long glass table, with Dana beside me. On the other side sat Elaine, Richard, and Mason. They had brought a lawyer this time, a junior associate from a strip mall firm who looked terrified of Dana. The settlement agreement and mutual release lay in the center of the table. Mason was the first to sign. He had to sign a separate affidavit admitting to the vandalism of my property. His face was a deep, burning crimson. He wouldn't look at me. He scribbled his signature aggressively, almost tearing the paper, radiating the petulant anger of a child who had finally been told no. "This stays private, right?" Mason muttered, pushing the paper away. "You are not putting this on the internet?" "As long as you pay the restitution and stay away from my client," Dana said coolly, sliding the paper into her file. "This document lives in my safe. If you come within 500 feet of Clara's apartment, or if you send one more threatening text, I hand it to the district attorney. Do we understand each other?" Mason swallowed hard and nodded. Then it was Richard and Elaine's turn. They signed the transfer deeds for the cabin. They signed the acknowledgement of debt. They signed the addendum to their wills recognizing my 50% equity in the family home. Finally, the document came to me. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy, but not in a bad way. It felt like a tool. "Before you sign, Clara," Dana said, her voice formal for the benefit of the opposing counsel, "let us review Clause 14, which we added this morning." She looked at my parents. Clause 14 stipulates that this is a total financial severance. Dana read, "From this date forward, there will be no commingling of funds, no loans, no gifts, no shared accounts. Clara Pruitt is forever released from any financial obligation to Richard, Elaine, Mason, or Brielle Pruitt. Any request for funds by any family member will be considered a breach of this settlement and will void the non-disclosure agreement regarding the fraud." Elaine looked up, her eyes narrowing. "So that is it? You are just cutting us off? What if there is an emergency? What if your father gets sick?" "Then you use the money you saved by not paying for Mason's mistakes," I said. "Or you sell the house, but you do not call me." I lowered the pen to the paper. I wrote my name, Clara Pruitt. The ink was black and permanent. With that signature, I wasn't just signing a legal deal. I was signing my own Emancipation Proclamation. I was buying my freedom, and the cost was the illusion of a happy family. It was a bargain. We walked out of the building 20 minutes later. The elevator ride down had been silent, the air thick enough to choke on. When the doors opened into the lobby, Richard and Mason hurried toward the exit, unable to get away fast enough. But Elaine lingered. She stopped near the revolving doors. She turned to me. Her face was composed now, her mask back in place, but there was a bitterness in her eyes that was brand new. "I hope you are happy, Clara," she said. Her voice was low, meant only for me. "You won the lawsuit. You got your money. You got your cabin." She stepped closer, invading my personal space one last time. "But you lost your family," she hissed. "One day, you are going to wake up in that expensive apartment of yours, and you are going to realize that money doesn't hug you back. You will regret choosing cash over the people who raised you." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had forged my signature, stolen my inheritance, and gaslit me for a decade. I felt a strange sense of pity. She still didn't get it. She truly believed that money was the only thing of value I had fought for. "You are wrong, Mom," I said softly. I adjusted my scarf, meeting her gaze with a calmness that unsettled her. "I didn't choose money," I said. "I chose respect, and that is the one thing I never would have gotten if I stayed in your family." I didn't wait for her response. I pushed through the revolving door and stepped out onto the street. Minneapolis was covered in a fresh layer of snow. It was falling softly, large white flakes drifting down from a gray sky, muffling the noise of the city traffic. The air was cold and clean, biting at my cheeks. I stood under the awning for a moment. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I waited for the wave of sadness. I waited for the guilt, the regret, the sudden panic of being an orphan by choice. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a vast, pristine emptiness. It wasn't a lonely emptiness. It was the emptiness of a room that has finally been cleared of hoarding. It was the emptiness of a blank page. It was the feeling of space. Space to breathe. Space to move. Space to build a life that wasn't anchored to someone else's debts. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Aunt Lydia. "The deed transfer is recorded. The lawyer confirmed it. And Mason's check for the door just cleared. It is done. Clara, you are free." I smiled, a real smile. I put the phone away. I looked down the street toward the parking garage where my car was waiting. Behind me, inside the glass tower, my family was likely arguing, blaming each other, spinning new webs of denial. They were ghosts now. They existed on paper and in memory, but they could no longer touch me. I stepped out from under the awning. The snow fell on my coat, melting instantly. I started walking. I walked alone, my heels clicking rhythmically on the pavement. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. For the first time in my life, the only direction that mattered was forward. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below and let's get a conversation started. If you enjoyed Clara's journey to freedom, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear these stories of justice and resilience.